мною принято решение о проведении специальной военной операции.
Today at 1, we're live in Ukraine as Russia invades in a major military assault by land, sea and air.
It's now more than a month since the US Speaker, Nancy Pelosi, visited Taiwan. China's ambassador to Australia also issued a blunt warning a few days ago that those who push for Taiwanese independence will be punished.
We're waiting for a peaceful reunification, but we cannot rule out other options.
You won't have to do it anymore. 4 more years, you know what? It'll be fixed, it'll be fine. You won't have to vote anymore.
Welcome to Why We Fight. Democracy is at war. Around the globe, we're watching the forces of authoritarianism rise. From regimes like Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea to oligarchs, religious extremists, and populist demagogues. There are those who resist. Activists, journalists, academics, soldiers, faith leaders, and politicians. In this series, you'll meet them. You'll hear their stories, what they do, what democracy and freedom mean to them, and why it's worth fighting for. If you believe in this mission, don't forget to like and subscribe. Patreon and Substack supporters get early access and exclusive extras. And if you want to connect with others who care about democracy and a free, living world, join us on Discord. For my written work and commentary, check out my Substack, Dictators v Democrats. With that said, let's go. Welcome to this episode of Why We Fight. Today, I am returning to Pakistan for this episode. This is not something I usually do, speaking about the same area of the world back to back. However, there is a very good reason for it. And today we're speaking with a former military man, now a journalist and a dissident from Pakistan, Mr. Adil Raja. Mr. Raja, thank you very much for coming on the program.
Thank you, Melissa, for inviting me on your program. Really grateful.
Now, as I touched on, you spent 2 decades within Pakistan's military, and now you're one of its fiercest critics. What was that journey and what changed?
Yeah, well, not only that I've myself served for almost 21 years in the Pakistani military as a commissioned officer. I was a major once I took voluntary retirement in 2017. Before that, my dad, my granddad were both in the Pakistani military, Pakistani army. They were officers of the Pakistani army. And by that relation, I'm a 3rd generation Pakistani army officer. And the Pakistani military, Pakistani army is the elitist, it's supposed to be the elitist force in the, not elitist, once I say elitist, it means that all the political manipulation and the political interference and the Pakistani military junta, which has ruled over that country for better part of its independence from the British in 1947, they're all, it has all been governed by the Pakistani army, because the army's got the maximum strength, and there's always been an army general who's been ruling the country. And there have been stints of more than 10 years. The first one starting with the Field Marshal Ayub in 1950s to almost reaching the late 1960s, which resulted in the breakage of the country into 2 from East and West Pakistan. The East Pakistan became Bangladesh, the present-day Bangladesh. Then we had Zia-ul Haq, who ruled from the mid-1970s to late 1980s. Then we had General Musharraf, all Pakistan Army generals, by the way, who ruled the country in the better part after 9/11 up till, for another 10 or 11 years. And now we've got an aspirant to become 4th such dictator who wants to, rule for another stint of 10 years. And he is himself promoted. He's promoted himself as the Field Marshal now after the latest India-Pakistan 4-day near war. And he's Asim Munir. So the Pakistan army has always been involved in political manipulation, and because of that political manipulation, the Pakistani as a nation could never see political stability, and without political stability, you can never see economic stability. Now, one particular class, which is part of the kleptocracy in that country, it keeps on growing, it keeps on earning a lot of money, it keeps on living prosperous life, a global lifestyle. But the majority of the country, that is almost the 80% rest of the country, I would say 90% of the country, they live they live like you're supposed to live in a third world country, which Pakistan is. And because of the Pakistani army's involvement in the political manipulation, and because of that, there's never been a political stability in the country, and because of the political stability, there's never been economic stability in the countries, and the foreign investors, they don't invest in the country, and where there is no political or stability, and because of that, there has been no economic stability. So the people of Pakistan have been suffering because of the military's interference in the politics. So I have always known that. And I have been speaking against it. And we believe that, so because of I've always known that, and I've been writing about it, and I've been talking about it. Even as a serving officer, I had a blog going on with my own name, and I got reprimanded for that. So I stopped over there. But knowing that, and then, of course, being part of a war within, which was the result of the global war on terror. We fought a war within in Pakistan, and I became a war wounded officer, and I've survived 3 improvised explosive devices assassination attempts on me in 2010, and 1 vehicle-borne improvised explosive suicide attempt on me. I got injured, but I survived. So I became war wounded officer, and that is because I studied it, and I've suffered because of it. I suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder after that, and I sought professional help, and thankfully, I got well. But the thing is that I realized, being a part and parcel of the same hypocrisy, and witnessing it as an insider of the kleptocracy, that because of the political interference, Pakistan is not progressing as a nation, and is becoming a pariah state, and it is getting a bad name around the world. Because I had been traveling, my family has been, they migrated to the UK in 1960s, my mother's side, and my dad's side, my grandfather, he was prisoner of war in India after 1971 war, and once he came back to Pakistan, 1976, 75, he migrated to Canada. So I've been traveling because my family was abroad, and I had seen the world. And once you travel, you become self-aware, and you also, you get aware of what's happening around the world. So you're not, you don't have a myopic vision anymore. So you can and then I was also fond of reading books, different writers. So I realized at that time in 2010, after the last suicide bombing I faced in September of 2010, October 2010, that it is a political issue, because these people we are fighting, they're the same people which we have created, the Mujahideen, in 1980s with the CIA and the ISI, Pakistan's intelligence agency, and Americans through the CIA. They created the Afghan Mujahideen, and they made them fight, equipped them, and made them fight against the USSR, and they succeeded in that fight. USSR's demise was largely because of the fight in Afghanistan, because of the Afghan Mujahideen. But as soon as the job was done, it was they were left to their own instruments. The USA packed, their paraphernalia, the CIA packed their paraphernalia, and they left the Mujahideen, who were the international ideological mercenaries, to their own devices. And the ISI, the Americans could do that, the CIA could do that, but the ISI couldn't do that. So the ISI recruited them, deployed them in different proxy conflicts in the region. And come at 9/11, 2001, once you saw the Twin towers coming down. And the world remembered, well, you've got these militant mercenaries and intellectual ideological mercenaries who were then named as terrorists. Well, they were the friends. They were invited to the White House, and now they're terrorists and they have to be rooted out. So the ad hoc policy resulted in another ad hoc policy, and it was essentially a political problem, which should have been solved by a political solution. But once armies ruling, and once armies ruling, it lacks public mandate. Military rule lacks public mandate. General Musharraf was ruling then. It's a one-window operation, suits the superpowers as well. They told Musharraf, all right, you're with us or against us. At least that's what Musharraf told us. And Musharraf took the side of the US, and they took a U-turn on the policy on supporting these international ideological mercenaries, or mujahideen, who are now the terrorists. And they started going after them. And we were the one who suffered. We were the one who got targeted. We were the one who's seen as enemy, and they became the enemies. So it was a war with them. That is where I realized that if a government or a regime or a state lacks public mandate, it will always create these problems which you've got right now. And that is where I started supporting Imran Khan. I have been supporting him ever since I was a kid. I raised funds for him in school for his cancer hospital after he won the Cricket World Cup for us in 1992. So I started supporting him once I was in service in 2010. In 2010, I gave my first resignation. The application for voluntary retirement is called a resignation in the Pakistani military, because you render a certificate with it that I'm willing to resign my commission if my application is not accepted. Without terminal benefits, I'm willing to resign my commission. So that is why it's called a resignation. So it got rejected. I applied for the second time, I applied for the third time, I applied for the fourth time, I applied for the fifth time. And the fifth application, and there is a gap period. I'm going to take 6 months for it to go through. And if they turn it down, then you have to wait, as per the military law of Pakistan, another 6 months for applying again, for resigning again. So I took the right way, and then I resigned 5 times to finally be granted with my application for voluntary retirement. And it was not a resignation. I got my commission, I got my pensions, and I've got all the benefits. And there are lots of them for a Pakistani army officer, because you were the one on whose behalf the generals are ruling. So they got to keep the officers happy. So I got all that, and in 2016 I went on leave pending retirement, and I was a war-wounded officer. So there was a policy by then Army Chief General Rohil Sharif that the war-wounded officer has to be given a voluntary retirement with full-on benefits. So I got the full-on benefits. And I transited into civilian life. I started writing in the Pakistani English dailies, The Nation. I started writing articles. I became a spokesperson for the Pakistani Ex-Servicemen Society, and the role was that I had to, coordinate the military's policy with the inter-services public relations and the intelligence Pakistani ISI's policy with the public narrative being spread out by the defense analyst. And I was doing that job, and I was writing as well, publishing as a columnist, and I was doing a very successful business as a billionaire in Pakistani currency, as a billionaire businessman in the Pakistani currency, mind you, again, as a land provider, as a real estate developer for the military's real estate giant, the Defense Housing Authority. By the way, in Pakistan, the military runs all the businesses, all the mega businesses. They run it themselves. They are the biggest business owners in Pakistan as well, the Pakistani military. So I started doing the business as well. I was very successful, and in 2018, even before that, I practically became part of the Imran Khan's movement for justice, and I supported him, and he came into power in 2018. We were very happy, and Pakistanis all around the world and Pakistan were happy that Imran Khan is here now, and and things were looking really good for first time in decades, that Pakistan was really progressing. There was in 2022 there was a regime change operation because of a strategic or a mistake by Imran Khan, in which his own military turned against him, who was previously supporting him. They asked him, because they asked him to go to Russia, all right, and he was invited by Putin. Now, this must be of interest to you. Imran Khan, the cricketing legend turned politician, was sent to Russia by the Pakistani military bosses. But even before that, now we know as a fact that he went to Russia on President Putin's invitation, and the day Russia invaded Ukraine, he was in Moscow. So he didn't know that, obviously, and he was told to cut short his visit and come back. But he said, "No, well, I'm already here. I'm not going to come back." That was another mistake which he made, and that was portrayed to in Washington D.C. as him being very stubborn, because he is a very stubborn leader. He believes in civilian supremacy in a system which runs under military dominance. So the military wasn't happy with him, and they were already portraying to the rest of the world that listen, we need to get rid of Imran Khan. And that was not only because they were misguiding Imran Khan, or Imran Khan was stubborn enough not to listen to him, and naive enough in the Pakistani system to believe in civilian supremacy, but it was because the Sharif plan, which was named in the Panama Papers, they had President Zardari, the current president, and they allegedly made an underhand deal with the military for their return. So there is this cipher which was written by the Assistant Secretary of State. There was a meeting by the Pakistani ambassador in the Washington D.C., Asad Majid, with the Assistant Secretary of State for South Asia under the Biden administration, Donald Liu. So Donald Liu told him that, listen, we are really fed up of Imran Khan. You need to remove him from power. If you don't remove him from power, there are a lot of hard times coming in for Pakistan, and you'll be sanctioned and stuff. And if you remove him, everything would be okay. So the ambassador wrote it down in a secret cipher and sent it to Pakistan. And that cipher was made. Imran Khan wasn't presented that cipher. Later on, he did get hold of the cipher and told the rest of the nation, because of which he's facing the charges of treason and breach of Official Secrets Act. But anyway, so Imran Khan was basically he was trapped like this, and he was removed from power and through the military. And I was the one in 2022 who exposed the plan of the military, and while in Pakistan, that, listen, this is what actually transpired. And because of that, I was considered as someone who's a whistleblower, and whistleblowers are my friend Arshad Sharif, award-winning journalist from Pakistan, assassinated in Kenya. They're either assassinated or put in jail, like Imran Khan himself was put in jail because he brought the cipher out. So I had to escape. My family was already, my wife and my kids were already here in the UK, and they're living here. So I was shuttling between London and Islamabad and Rawalpindi. So 21st of April 2022, the fateful day, after 2 raids on my mother's home where I was living at Rawalpindi by the ISI, I escaped to the UK, and ever since I'm living here, and I'm now a full-fledged journalist, investigative journalist who's done a lot of stories and still facing the wrath of the Pakistani state, who got me arrested here in the UK on counter-terrorism charges, and which there was an investigation for 9 months, ended with a no further action, and the charges, I was never charged. And failing that, they're dragging me in the Royal Court of Justice in the UK, because since London is the libel tourism capital, and that's not me saying it, that's people like Jeffrey Robertson, King's Counsel, saying it, that London is definitely, and Freedom House saying it. So I'm facing SLAPP legislation, strategic lawsuit against public participation by the intelligence agency ISI's senior commander. Imagine that. Yes. He was spending a lot of money against me to silence me. and I'm still fighting. All my assets in Pakistan were seized. My mom got abducted. My sister back home was tortured, still being tortured. My mom is not allowed to leave the country. She was abducted on her way to the airport when she was leaving the country alongside my uncle, who was an ex-army officer, a colonel, and he's no more with us. He died a few months ago. So that's all happening, and my mom is practically living under house arrest, and I mean, that is a torture in itself. Her citizenship has been cancelled. Her passport has been blocked, not allowed to leave. My citizenship, my passport has been cancelled, not allowed to leave. So a lot is going on. All this is going on, and all this is going on just because I'm fighting against fascism in my country, and my people believe in my fight, and that is why I fight.
I'm sorry that you've gone through so much and sacrificed such an amount for speaking out. I want to focus in on what you've described about Pakistan's military from your experience and your experience now as a dissident. And you've described it before as a deep state. Now that phrase has a lot of connotations, and some people amongst my audience may not be fully clued up on what's happening in Pakistan. But I want to focus on what the military's control of the country looks like, how they do it, because to many an outside observer, Pakistan has elections. Pakistan appears to have some civilian leadership. And it appears to me that you're saying that is essentially a shell game. And I also want to ask, what is the effect of the military's deep state on the life of a normal Pakistani civilian just trying to get about, do their business, raise their family, etc.?
Yeah, Mullah, so Pakistani military controls Pakistan in the typical fashion in which any deep state would control. But like in the US, you've got a deep state, but there are different power centers. It's not only the deep state which is controlling everything. There are different power centers. There's House of there's Congress, Senate. There is then White House. So there are different power centers, and then there's media as well. The fourth pillar, as they call it. But in Pakistan, in the words of former Prime Minister Benazir Bhutto, she said that ISI is a state within state, which is true. Every kid, 250 million Pakistanis know this to be a fact. So it is a state within the state. How do they control? How do they maintain the grip on power? Well, they've got politicians who are, you very rightly said it, the shell game. We're part of the shell game. We're part of this puppet government in charge. Well, they control them. How do they control them? Well, they've got the corruption files. Everybody who's part of the kleptocracy in Pakistan is corrupt. They maintain files on their corruption. They fabricate charges on them, and then they maintain files on them. Then there are honey trapping operations. They use the honey trapping traps, and then they make their videos, and then they make their audios, and it's a blackmailing business as well. They use that, and if it all fails, like in the case of Imran Khan, they tried everything and it fails. Well, they use brute force, and they just, either assassinate you. Benazir Bhutto has been assassinated. His dad was assassinated. There's been assassination attempt on Imran Khan. Most recent assassination attempt in 2022 was on Imran Khan. So there are assassinations, political assassinations, and then the political leaders are jailed. And how do they manage that? Well, they manage it by managing the judiciary in Pakistan. They control the judiciary. They blackmail the judges. Don't believe me for saying it. The judiciary itself, the judges of the Islamabad High Court, they wrote letters to the Supreme Judicial Council and the Supreme Court and the Chief Justice that the ISI, the intelligence agencies, are putting cameras in our bedrooms, and they're abducting our relatives and they're torturing them. So this is all happening. And well, if you got the judges in your pocket, and if you got the entire system in your pocket, and then you got special vetting powers, no civil servant, police official, state official can be promoted if they're not cleared by the intelligence agency ISI. So they've got a hold over the judiciary, they've got a hold over the executive, they've got a hold over parliament. So through that hold, they get favorable policies made which suits their strategic, their personal interest of the generals, frankly, and the business interest of the military. And they're the one, they want to control the foreign policy of the country so that they can deal with foreign nations and they can deliver, and they deliver by controlling the governments. And then in the amongst all this madness comes people like Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, for example, who was, introduced into politics by a military dictator, by the way, Field Marshal Ayub Khan. But then he tried his level best to establish civilian supremacy, because after 1971, the military was really, not doing very well. They had lost half the country, so the public was not with them. And so the military has always been able to rule the country because of the public support. Like in recent times, they orchestrated a terrorist attack in the Indian side of Kashmir and Pahalgam, and they knew the result would be that India would attack them, and India did attack them. So they shot their few of their fighter jets with Chinese support, and then they said that this is a win. We've won the war, and and because of that, they got political mileage out of that. Now, whether that worked or not, we're going to see in the long run. But anyway, that is how military uses various levers of influence and control the politics in Pakistan, where to the rest of the world, you can see that there is civilian leadership in the country. Whereas, in fact, on ground, it is the military which is ruling. Of course, these civilian leadership do take advantage of the puppets or the shell governance. They do take advantage of their positions. Like Imran Khan tried to break the shackles, and what happened as a result? He's in shackles himself. So now everybody got that been a lesson for anybody who wanted, like after Bhutto, Imran Khan they have made him to be an example for anyone who desires civilian supremacy. So there's a lot of intrigue in the country, but at the end of the day, the real power lies with the military, and there have been books written about it, research thesis papers written about it. They're the one who actually control, and the international community are, once they, international relations are basically based on your national interest. So this is in the national interest of the national community of the nations that they have to, deal with the people who are really in power in Pakistan. So they're dealing with the military, and they're okay with, even if they're not okay with it, they're not objecting to it. And that is why a Pakistani senior military general comes into London, and he's trying his luck with a SLAPP suit against me, strategic lawsuit against public participation against me, and it is being allowed. Why is it being allowed? Because once it comes to Russia or China, they're seen as enemies, but once it comes to Pakistan, it's seen as an ally, because the one-window operation provided by the Pakistani military facilitates serves the national interest of maybe UK or the USA. Yeah,
I want to ask about these geostrategic realities clashing with principles later. But you've also been convicted in absentia, accused of inciting sedition. And the Pakistani military appears to view dissent as a threat to national security, or just to its own authority. How can those within Pakistan and those of the exiled diaspora combat that?
Yeah, well, you're right in pointing out that while I was doing what I was doing, not only that I got court-martialed in absentia without even serving me a notice, and they awarded 14 years rigorous imprisonment against me for I don't know what charges even, but in this case, I was told that it's because of the Official Secrets Act and sedition that I was, charged. But even today, they got a court order banning, and because of that, my YouTube channels were terminated as well. But now they've got court orders terminating all the channels on YouTube which are considered to be, even remotely considered to be, voices of dissent in Pakistan. So yeah, dissent is considered as something which is detrimental to the military's hold over power in Pakistan, because military's hold over power in Pakistan, as I told you, is founded on the public support of the military, and the core strength of the military is from Punjab, and the majority of the population of the country belongs to Punjab. So they want to have the support in Punjab, and that is why they don't want anybody, voices of dissent, to be heard in Punjab, although it's not working, frankly. But they are very desperate. These actions are desperate actions, desperate measures, because for the first time in the history of Pakistan's existence, in 76 years of existence, it is the first time ever that people have started objecting to the military's hold over power, and that's because of the voices of dissent like me, and that is why they are being targeted so ruthlessly. Like my friend Arshad Sharif was assassinated once he escaped Pakistan to UAE. He got deported from UAE because of the Pakistani government's pressure, the Pakistani intelligence agency's pressure. And then he went to Kenya, where he was assassinated using the GSUs. And I was the one who broke the story of the ISI's involvement, of the Pakistani army chief's involvement, of the Pakistani intelligence chief's involvement, and that. And because of that story, and the people were named in the Supreme Court by Arshad Sharif's mum back in Pakistan. But nothing happened, because these are powerful people. They're controlling the states. They've got the support of the international community behind them. Why? Because, well, they are looking for their own interest, aren't they? They're not interested in what's happening in Pakistan and what's happening with the people. This is realpolitik. That's what we are witnessing, and that is why it is really important for the voices of dissent to continue speaking up against this kind of fascism, because at the end of the day, we're talking about a country which is a nuclear armed country of 250 million people, where for the second time in the history, a military ruler wants to empower the mullahcracy, the international ideological mercenaries, or whom the rest of the world calls as terrorists, right? So the current regime of Asim Munir, who's promoted himself as the field marshal, well, he banks on the mullahcracy, or the mercenaries, the militant international Islamists, as you may like to. Somebody calls them Islamists, somebody calls them terrorists, but they are the mainstream. They're in the mainstream politics and mainstream society of Pakistan. They're the one Asim Munir is banking his power on, because he does not have the people's support. So he is now, again, propping them up, and he's banking on their support. So what will happen if I'm a dictator? Why it's important to fight back? Why it's important? Why these voices of dissent are important? Why this kind of whistleblowing and this kind of journalism is important? Because these people, the global powers who are supporting this, the dictators in Pakistan, they need to realize that the dictators, once they do not have public support, and they rarely have public support, they bank on proxy militant elements. They bank on brute force to control, right? And that is where terrorism and fundamentalism, or extremism, that is how Pakistan became a breeding ground of those kind of forces. And that is where the discontent of, these are only few 100,000 people, it's fine, but at the end of the day, an entire society gets radicalized once you are brainwashing them, or once you are constantly doctoring them through these madrasas of militant organizations, or once jobs are only available either in the military or with the mercenaries of militant organizations, so prescribed militant organizations. So you're radicalizing a nation of 250 million people, a nation which is nuclear armed, all right, which is a nation which has got all means to wreak havoc in the region, and it has already happened in the past. I mean, this is the first time. Why did you go there after 9/11 in Afghanistan? I mean, why did he stay in Pakistan? Why did he call Pakistan the most dangerous country in the world? It is because of the Pakistani military, and it is because of the double game which the Pakistani military plays. It is because the Pakistani military is always playing both sides. It's always at one hand they've got these proxy elements whom they use to exercise influence domestically and regionally, and at the same time they are talking as diplomats to, like, for example, the Field Marshal Asim Munir was having a lunch last month with President Trump at White House. I mean, what is that about? Imagine that. But that's how they operate. At one hand, they're portraying themselves to be moderate, good guys. These diplomats, these savvy. I mean, they're generals. But they're wearing these nicely tailored, expensive suits, and they're going and meeting President Trump, and they're having meetings in the State Department, and they're getting guard of honors here in London. On the other hand, they've commissioned these militant organizations, and then anybody who speaks against it, they're using state power to shut them up, to permanently, or put them in jail. I mean, they're passing laws which suits them in the country, and internationally, when they say, whatsoever we've done it as per the law. Well, if you're controlling the law, you're making the law. Well, that law is going to serve you, and that is why it's really important that if you don't want a nuclear armed country like Pakistan to fall in the hands of extremist elements, and so you have to bring democracy in that country, because democracy caters for the public interest, and public interest is in political stability, economic stability. People need job, they need food, they need to live a prosperous life, they need to live in peace. Well, that suits a politician, and that suits a democratic government to take forward or work on those interests. But once a general is in charge, his only interest is his personal interest, and that is the extension of his rule. So he'll do anything which he can to extend his rule. So that is why it is really important to promote democracy in the countries like Pakistan. I'm talking about Pakistan. Yeah.
And again, just I wanted to touch on it to emphasize it. What would life be like for a working class Pakistani chap who wants to build a better life for his family, and what influence would he feel from the military in normal day-to-day life?
Yeah, Mullis, here, the thing is that the Pakistanis, you need to understand this, Pakistan is a third world country. Normal person, he doesn't know. He's only worried about putting food on the table for his kids or for himself, or providing shelter to them. So, and he cannot dare go against the military. If he does, the military or the ISI would send the local police, get him booked under so many laws they've passed. And there he goes. He'll be staying in jail. And if he tries to do more, the military itself would come. And there are cases of missing person in Pakistan who were in thousands, right? And only the dead bodies are ever found. So there are active insurgencies in at least 2 provinces of Pakistan. And there are militant insurgencies right now because of discontent and because of these policies of the Pakistani military, and which can, go And because of that, the military is also suffering. The military lower ranks, who are common Pakistanis, they're also suffering. But common Pakistanis are suffering. There's an air of fear all over in Pakistan. It's like being in North Korea. I would say that's the only country you can compare it with under the current circumstances. It is like living in North Korea or Iran, maybe. Yeah, you
Iran,
cannot
modern
really-
Russia.
Yeah, modern Russia, of course. If you say something, even if you're a journalist, either you'll get killed or you'll be thrown in a jail. You'll be picked up for firstly, you'll be thrashed, and even then, if you don't listen, you'll have to leave the country. And if you manage to leave the country, there are many journalists, many examples like me who've left the country and they're still speaking up. So they'll come after you, and there will be cases of transnational repression, which is happening right now. So
I want to get onto.
It's not really easy, Sorry, go on.
So I want to get onto transnational repression later, but two more questions on the current situation in three more actually in Pakistan, and one about service and about being in an organization like the military. Firstly, you've dealt with counter-terror, you've served. And Tim Snyder talks about modern tyranny as terror management, as emphasizing security over liberty. And how many times did you hear that word being used to justify a repression while you were serving?
Yeah, that is the basically textbook words used in counterinsurgency operations, that you have to, you never talk about the root cause of that terrorism. What is the root cause? Who produces terrorists, right? But whatsoever you're saying, definitely that is what being taught, and that is what is being told, because it suits the narrative. But the root cause has always been that terrorism has erupted, or it took birth once you militarized an entire society in the early 1980s in Pakistan. Once you were fighting the USSR, and you equipped them, you weaponized them, you armed them, and then you gave them the ideology of jihad, and you promoted the ideology. But just read Charlie Wilson's War, and you'll realize what I'm talking about. Or if you don't read books, then watch the movie Charlie Wilson's War. You'll realize what I'm talking about. You linked it with Christianity, and it was a godly duty, God-given duty, to fight against the USSR, against communism. You equipped the ideology. And you equip the people. Equipping the people with weapons is less dangerous than equipping an ideology, militarizing an ideology. You militarize an ideology which already existed. Fine, it already existed. But you weaponized it for your own benefit in a modern world. And then you just left it like that, instead of rehabilitating those people after the job was done, instead of rehabilitating those people into the mainstream. You just, let it go. And now you've got a third and fourth generation of international ideological mercenaries, which has formed Daesh, the Islamic State, and the Taliban in Pakistan. Who are these people? They're the people you have created. And now you're fighting them by these fancy words that, you have to fight them back. Obviously, now you have to fight them back. You've got no other choice. But let's acknowledge that was your actions which has created all this. Because I have been in charge of a de-radicalization program of the Pakistani army in 2015 in the Valley of Swat. And what we've been doing is we've been giving briefings about it to people like General David Petraeus and General Tommy McChrystal. He used to visit us, and we gave them presentations because we were quite successful in the de-radicalization programs, which should have been done after the objectives of Afghan jihad in the 1980s were met. But now they have been trying to do that. To some extent, to the credit of the Pakistani military, I would say that, but at the same time, de-radicalization is like you're teaching these people to do something else as per their educational background. You're teaching them different skills, and then you're investing small amounts of money for them to open businesses. Well, it does work fine. The success rate was more than 80%, which is a bit exaggerated, but even then, all right, let's say 70%. But it was very, very good. But it only works if you've got a functional economy. But if you don't have political stability, you won't have economic stability, and because of that, you won't have a functional economy. And and those people who were originally trained as a third generation international ideological mercenaries, they'll go back to the jobs which are paying more, and there are jobs which are paying more. All right, there are states are not sponsoring those militant organizations, but they've got their own resources. Like drug smuggling from Pakistan into Iran, into Turkey, into Europe. Then you've got oil smuggling in Pakistan, the car smugglings. Cars get stolen throughout Europe, ends up in Pakistan, right? So all this stuff going on is a revenue stream for these militant organizations, which are now quite legit because they've made so much money in the 1980s, like in Punjab, mainstream, the people with the Pakistani army is using right now. These guys, they've got their own welfare organizations, their own schools, their own hospitals, their own businesses. So they've got legitimate revenue streams, and that is why they've made their own political parties in Pakistan. So through them, if anybody like the current politicians, they try to flex some muscles, they can be muzzled, they can be silenced, they have been in the past as well. There's front of the military. So the problem is more complex than just simply saying that you have to fight these terrorists and you have to, take them to task. You need to realize it's a political problem, and the political problem never has a military solution. And that is the basis of the entire problem. You're only creating more terrorists by these actions. You kill a family in drone strike, all right? Innocent people have been killed, innocent children have been killed in drone strikes by the US, or even right now the Pakistani drone strikes. The entire family would become terrorists. So the birth of the terrorists take place once you kill a terrorist who was supposed to be your proxy, but now he's a terrorist. And of course, he's not going to back off, because there's a vicious cycle of generations of violence in which violence is all they know, and fighting is all they know, being mercenaries is all they know. And once you, instead of rehabilitating them or de-radicalizing them, which is a hard path, mind you, as I just told you through personal experience, because you need a functional economy there as well, and there's a lot of moving parts there, you just take the simple way out and you kill them. And you don't even go there yourself, because this is very porous and dangerous terrain, difficult terrain. You send a drone out, you fire a missile, and you not only kill him, but you'll kill his children and his wife, maybe, or elderly people at his home. You made the entire family or the entire tribe into a terrorist, anti-state element. So there, the vicious cycle continues. Anybody who supports the state would also be considered an enemy by them. And they only live by the code of blood for blood. Of course, I believe that if to believe in an eye for an eye, it would turn the whole world blind. That is what Gandhi said, and I think he was right. But then you are again committing the same mistakes over and over again. And if you to expect a different result by repeating your own mistakes is stupidity, don't you think, Wallace? What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. You have to break free of that. And I don't see any way that, as you say, I don't see any way that you can break free of that cycle through violence alone. And if the structures, if the economic, if the political, if the social structures are not there, well, then you've got a losing game. But I want to ask about service, and especially I've served in the police in London for 7 years. You served in the Pakistani military for 2 decades, and I left eventually, as did you. And when I was serving, I always had at the back of my mind the idea that at some point I may have to refuse an order, or even, if push really came to shove, break my oath to the crown. And I wonder if you have a message for those, or any advice for those who have to serve in organizations like the military and police in democratic countries.
Yeah, well, you see, the basic principle taught to you in training is do or die. Do or die, never ask why. Well, that is a problem there, isn't it? That's why you've got the issues of post-traumatic stress disorder, because you're never asking why. And because of PTSDs, there have been so many deaths, and there have been so many incidents in the US, in the UK, in Pakistan. And then it's a social taboo to acknowledge that you've got PTSD. That is another debate for some other day, maybe. But you see, there's a very fine line between doing what's right and what's not. And you have to do everything by staying on the right side of the law. The same law which is asking you to do or die, never ask why, provides you with certain kinds of protections. You need to be on the right side of law, and you need to use the law, because new laws passed cannot supersede the original laws or the laws written before them. So there are laws there which does exist and which can be used. Of course, there's a cost to be paid. Once your superior officer is telling you to do an unlawful action, or maybe which is lawful as per the latest law. For example, in my case, they court-martial me in absentia by quoting by amending the Pakistan Army Act, but the original law in the Constitution of Pakistan, Article 2, tells you the right to defend yourself. So, or by the original law, the original law supersedes this new law. So there is a position in the law based upon which you can take a stand. But in Pakistan, they say that if you can either have a career or you can take a stand. All right. So if you take a stand, you won't have a career. You just have to say yes, sir. And if you say yes, sir, in the military or in the police, well, you've got a bright career in front of you. You're a good boy. Then you'll say, well, but if you take a stand, and there are always legal ways to take a stand, and that is how I took a stand throughout my career. I mean, my officers my commanders have been telling me to slaughter. For example, in 2009 and 10, one of my commander, brigadier, his name was Brigadier and I won't take name, maybe that'll create a problem for you, but he was a brigadier, and he told me that you see any bearded man, you slit his throat. That's what you do, and that's how you're going to spread terror in this area. And we need this to work in our way. Well, I was surprised. He would go up in a heli, and he would be, commanding from the AROP, Air Observation Post, sitting at a safe distance out of the range of the small arms or even RPGs, 7s, right? And he expected me to slit the throats of the people with beard. I mean, almost everyone in that area, we're talking about the neighborhood of Peshawar, they've got a beard, all right? And even then, why would I do that? If somebody's not firing, even if he's firing at me, all right, I'll defend myself, I'll fire back. But why in the world would I slit his throat? Well, then what would be the difference between a terrorist and me if I'm slitting the throats, So I asked him, now there are no laws, there are laws, all right? So I told him, sir, it's illegal. I can't do that. And if you still want me to do that, give me the order in writing. Now, these guys, they're never going to give you these stupid orders in writing, isn't it? So if you're forced to do something, and if your conscience is not allowing you to do it, knowing that's not right, but of course there is a confusion that maybe it's right or not, or maybe the situation requires it, or whatever, all right? I'll ask them for a written order, and they can't give a written order if it's illegal. So if it's legal, you got to do it, isn't it? Well, if it's illegal, ask for a written order and don't do it. So that is how you navigate it, and that's how I've been navigating it.
That's Timothy Snyder, gotta say the word correctly, his name. Rule 7 in On Tyranny, that is it. Be reflective if you must be armed. know that the evils of the past involved policemen and soldiers finding themselves one day doing irregular things. Be ready to say no. I want to ask about geostrategy. Geostrategic needs, as we've touched on, often seem to come before support for democratic values in foreign affairs, and it seems to me to be a long-term error. And what should the democracies do when faced with unfortunate geopolitical realities that clash with democratic principles?
Well, that's a very tricky question, Mullis. I do understand that where you're heading with that. Where I'll give an example of the UK now. In the age of strategic competition, like we are living in right now, and we are facing this strategic competition after almost 5 decades. Before this, it was the USSR and the USA, the Cold War era. I mean, this nature of the strategic competition was even only in that era. And now we are faced with a strategic competition between US-led West and of course China-led Russian camp, we would say. Or people used to like to call it global south, but I think the competition and the lines are still blurred. All right, we do like to call it and we do like to talk about it, that it's a multipolar world right now we are living in, but in reality it's far from it at this stage. And the latest example is the Israel-Iran war, where the US decided that the war needs to end, and it decided it by bombing Iran, all right, at the same time. But even Iran had to comply with the US administration, President Trump's decision. And Israel ultimately also had to, comply with the decision taken in Washington, D.C. And President Trump actually used some forceful words for Israel later on, once they thought that they can still get away with anything. But, well, President Trump did use the F word, all right, for Iran and Israel. They don't know what the F is going on. So that was a warning, all right, that I am the global policeman, and this is still a unipolar world order. For the UK, if the UK's philosopher, UK's influencers, or UK's community who are supposed to be the thought makers, if they are going to promote a multipolar world order narrative, that doesn't favor the UK's strategic interest. And because UK is extending its special relationship with the USA, and projecting it to the rest of the world in their national interest. I've given you an example. And in that era, the UK's policymakers are asking for curtailing various freedoms, like the freedom of press when it comes to reporting on Palestine or Gaza issue, And based on that, you see a very controversial decision taken against the Palestine action. You've seen the decision, and you've seen the action.
Yes, very worrying.
So I am trying to explain, since your question, all right, I'm playing the devil's advocate over here. All right, let's call it that. But and just yesterday in the House of Commons, I asked this question to the Right Honourable MP, Mr. John McDonnell. I was there in the committee room, and it was a closed meeting by the National Union of Journalists was there. So I asked him the question. I said, please, I apologize in advance for being blunt. And then I asked the question that Mr. McDonnell, who was a pro-Palestine voice of reason, I would say. But I asked him a question that the strategic community of the UK believes that in this era of strategic competition, we have to, put limits on the freedoms, and we have to be realistic about it. And we cannot promote the idea of a multipolar world order versus the unipolar world order. And in that context, the strategic community of the UK believes that we have to support Israel. And that is why we are seeing what we are witnessing. So what is your counter argument? His counter argument was that we have to accept Israel, but then at the same time, in the same breath, he said that if we accept Israel, the people who go and fight for IDF would be liable to be tried in the UK courts. So that's why the UK is not going to do that. So it is a question of balancing the democratic aspiration of the UK versus the strategic reality or the strategic competition or the strategic compulsions, maybe. But it is for a democratically elected government to decide the strategic compulsions of a country and then follow through. Now, comparing it with my motherland, where my mother is incarcerated. Yeah. In Pakistan, the same thing is happening, and the generals are doing whatsoever they're doing, and they are playing the double games or not under the same mantra of strategic compulsions. But then the strategic compulsions are being decided by unelected generals. How could it be acceptable for the people of Pakistan? Now, if there would have been a democratically elected government, which it is not right now, they rigged the elections. There have been reports of United Nations, of the European Union, of the US government and the UK's government of serious irregularities in the latest elections in 2024, February 2024, which every Pakistani, even the child, knows that it had been rigged to rob this Imran Khan's mandate and install the current puppet regime. Now, if this regime or the generals decide the strategic compulsion of Pakistan, well, nobody's going to buy it. Nobody's going to accept it. So that is again a question that once a strategic priority has been decided, or priorities have been decided by a democratically elected government, at the end of the day, you have elected it. So you got to go by it. You got to live by it. You got to, in fact, sacrifice certain freedoms there as well. But at the same time, you've got the right to fight and fight back, of course. And that is how a civilian society works. And if the society is not allowed to operate in that manner, then there are unresolved issues which are left simmering. And unresolved issues left simmering results in incidents of 9/11 or 7/7 bombings, which are heartbreaking. Innocent people get suffered because of that. So that is what my take on this.
And turning to again to the UK, and we've spoken about it very briefly. You have a case coming up in the High Court brought by the ISI against you. This is a SLAPP case. What's been your experience with that, and how is it being used to suppress your voice?
Well, the experience has been horrible. All my assets have already been seized in Pakistan. My pension has been seized. Everything I had, my properties, my bank accounts have been frozen. So I was left stranded. I had nothing actually. I was thinking of moving from Pakistan to the UK. My assets as well, but because of my moral stand or my journalistic duty or my I would say dissent or whistleblowing got all of my assets seized. So I had to crowdfund my efforts to fight this case. Now, in the words of Jeffrey Robertson, King's Counsel, he wrote this book, Lawfare: How Russians, the Rich and the Government Try to Prevent Free Speech and How to Stop Them. Well, UK provides with the kind of laws which are most claimant friendly, and anybody can, the burden of proof is on the defendant. The claimant does not have to prove that he's got the allegations against him are wrong, but the defendant has to prove it, all right? And then the laws are designed as such that if a defense is making an application, it gets rejected, or if the claimant is making an application, it gets approved. And this case has been going on it started in 2022 and now it's going to trial in 2025. 3 years, they've made several applications. I've made several applications. If my applications get rejected, I have to pay the price. their defense, and if their applications gets approved, I have to pay the price of their application. So this way, you get punished throughout, and then it's a case by state. So they say that, well, Adil Raja has been fined. These are not fines; they are court costs. I've already paid like £35,000 in court costs like this. It's a punishment, isn't it? £35,000, and they get these news published as if in the Pakistani English media, which get picked up by AI engines, and they consider it to be an authority. And if somebody searches, for example, on Grok, that, well, what's his credibility? Well, they say he's been fined because of such and such newspaper says it, whereas those are not fines. So that's a separate topic. But I tell you that it's a constant stress. It's a constant fighting back. And then the security scare as well at the same time, because the UK's counterterrorism police told me, and the UK, my local police told me that, listen, you are under threat, and there have been evidence that I've been threatened with, and my country's intelligence agencies have got people killed in the past. My own friend Arshad Sharif is a prime example. Even in London, they've hired people to stab dissidents from London, and it has been happening. Political dissidents have been killed in London before as well. So I have to live my family. I'm used to it. I'm a soldier. I knew the risk. But even my kids, my family, my wife, they have to live in fear, constant fear. They have to live in hiding. They at a police protected address. So there's a security aspect to it, and then the lawfare is designed as a strategic lawsuit against public participation. So I have to constantly fight back, but at the same time, there's a constant stress of fighting, the fundraising, of living in fear, of a constant stress on you, and then fighting the state-sponsored cyber media cells, the troll factories at the same time. And you're fighting the state-sponsored media as well, English-speaking media. Since Pakistan was a British colony, there's a lot of English-speaking population, so they're constantly, trying to malign you, and they're trying to belittle you, and these things do matter. At the end of the day, media trials are all about the media coverage. But I'm fighting back, and I'll continue to fight back, because that is what I know. And previously you asked me about the people, how a common man in Pakistan lives. Well, you've got to understand the philosophy of people in Pakistan, and there are different philosophies, how people think. People in Pakistan think that, well, and that's what they've been made to believe, that, well, this is a temporary life, all right, and you live for 70, 80 years, even if you live a full life, 90 years, and that's not much. You asked old people, they'll tell you, well, the life passed just like that. We don't know how it passed. And you're never happy with that, because, well, it just passes in a jiffy, isn't it? So they say that, this life is a test, and we are just living this test, and we'll go in the afterlife, and that is when the real life begins. So this life is only, you're being tested in this life, whereas that should not be the case always, and it is not the case with the super rich and those who go on the wrong side, and who are siding with the oppressive regimes, but they get benefited. I mean, at the face of it, the material plane, you see them enjoying their lives, like the claimant is a brigadier in this case we're talking about, and he's spending like millions of pounds. From where did he get those? That's the first question, right? And he's living a lavish life, obviously, because siding with an oppressive regime does pay you well. Crime pays you well, but you're going on the right side. So you got to make believe that, listen, life and death is all certain by God. You got to be a believer. And if you're not a believer, you're in trouble then. You got to be a believer. You got to believe that your life and your days have already on this earth have already been decided for you. Yeah, you would be tested, and if you're being tested, then you got to stay on the right path, on the right side of history, on the being on the righteous side. And if you're on the righteous side, you'll get rewarded in the afterlife. That's a hope. That's a way of thinking in my country, in my culture. In the subcontinent, they call it karma. Karma, and people do. I'm taking the name of karma because a lot of people invest, and a lot of people in the world can relate to that concept. Yeah. So but you will reap what you sow. With that philosophy, I'm fighting back, and I believe that everything is happening for a reason. I am a believer. I believe everything is happening for a reason. The universe works in mysterious ways. God plays in mysterious ways, and I believe it's all happening for a reason. There are forces at play, greater powers at play, whether you believe or not, which even you cannot understand. And I mean, what's happening is much more than what's visible. That's what I believe, and that is, I believe in the concept of Sufism, and Sufism teaches you as well that there is a parallel system at play which you might not be able to see, but it is definitely in play with the material plane, and that is what I believe in. I am a Sufi at heart, and that's a topic for some other day, maybe.
Perhaps, but on the SLAPP lawsuits and the legislation around them, very briefly, before we move on to values and advice, what would you want the UK to do to stop this form of transnational repression being used by countries like Pakistan, Iran, Russia, etc.?
Yeah, well, that's a very, very good question. I think the UK should end the cost nightmare, which I've just told you about. I had to pay £35,000 for the successful applications of the claimant even. The costs nightmare have to end in any case. Then the burden of truth must be, the burden of proof must be shifted partly to the claimant who's coming and claiming defamation. He must be proving to the court that I've got a good reputation and I am not involved in whatsoever being the allegations against me are wrong. Why they're wrong? At least he should show it, that why they're supposed to be wrong, why a journalist or investigative journalist in particular is wrong in making these assumptions or making these reports. So the burden of proof has to be partly shifted to the claimant as well, for him to prove that, listen, this is whatsoever you're doing is wrong, all right? So the primary objective of a SLAPP is to harass, intimidate, and financially and psychologically exhaust one's opponent via improper means. So if you acknowledge it, and it was acknowledged by Mr. Rab, in fact, so if you're acknowledging it, then you have to, end the costs nightmare, and you have to televise the trials. Why not? In the US, the trials can be televised. Why cannot be they televised in the UK for the world to see that what's actually going on? All right, that's a very important step. If you do that, well, the reputation lawyers of the UK, the barristers, they would also be, at least they'll think twice before taking up a case of, in my case, they've taken up a case of most infamous military general from Pakistan who's involved in political manipulation, assassination attempts, and torture of innocent people. So there has to be some kind of recourse. The people need to know that what kind of man is being presented by what kind of a barrister, what kind of a solicitor. So it has to be, and then you have to end the libel tourism. The most important thing is that you have to end the libel tourism. In the words of Jeffrey Robertson, I would say that the oligarchs, kleptocrats, and multinational flock to London, the libel capital of the world, to burnish reputations they cannot protect at home for three main reasons. First, English media law is the most claimant-friendly. Second, English court decisions in claimant's favor have much higher standing than any other place they would obtain from corrupt courts at home. I mean, they can buy corrupt courts at home like in Pakistan, but it's an English court giving them a clean chit, so it really does matter. And the third thing, to intimidate critics, especially human rights and anti-corruption NGOs, they're mostly based in the London. So the government said it would stop libel tourism in 2013 Defamation Act, but it did not. It merely made it hard for claimants, oligarchs, kleptocrats, multinationals, from wherever in the world to sue people who are not domiciled in Britain or Europe. All right, fine. But at the end of the day, they're still able to, if you've got a lot of money, you've got a few £1,000,000 to spare, you'll come and you will, take anybody to task. And London is the cultural capital of the world as well. And UK, you've got a lot of people, journalists working here. But the SLAPP legislation, like the anti-SLAPP laws, work in the US, for example, because all the judges have to do is to rule out actions that infringe their First Amendment protections. You don't have First Amendment protections in the UK. The freedom of speech is only merely there on paper, on ground. There is no freedom of speech. I would quote the Right Honourable Member of the Parliament, whom we met yesterday in the House of Commons. I was just mentioning earlier, John
MacDonald.
John MacDonald, yeah, he said the UK is unable to protect whistleblowers. That's the bottom line. So if you're unable to protect whistleblowers, you're unable to protect investigative journalists. So it means that investigative journalism is practically not possible in the UK. And anybody else who's doing it at his own cost, who's got nothing to lose and he's doing it, well, he'd be discredited by saying, well, he really doesn't matter. He's a conspiracy theorist. Well, he's just, he just makes things up because no credible publications are printing or publishing what he's saying. So you're belittling and you're gaslighting the whistleblowers. And UK's libel laws, in fact, enable the gaslighting of whistleblowers, enable gaslighting of investigative journalists, which should not happen, which should stop. I've just told you how.
Mm-hmm. It seems utterly perverse to me as a former police officer that in criminal law, of course, the state has to prove the offence. And in libel law, it is the other way around.
More or less, even libel laws, after 2013, there is no jury sitting there. Even there is no jury in trial. It is only the judge. The judge decides for whatever mood of the judge or judge's understanding is what is going to decide your fate. In these cases, the jury must be reintroduced in these defamation cases because the public have got the right to judge for themselves what they're listening and what they want to believe or not based on the evidence presented to them, of course.
On to your values. 3 questions before we bring this to a close. What images do the words freedom and democracy conjure in your mind? And what to you is the value of these ideas?
Well, I am a realist, all right, because I come from a country, I come from a culture where whatsoever is happening in your life, you say, well, that's God willing. Well, it was God's will, it's happened. And that's what you say. It is what it is, right? But democracy is the rule of majority. Even democracy is not perfect. But at least you've got a right to vote and you know that you're part and parcel of a system which is governing you. And like, for example, if you've got a problem, you can reach out to your MP and the MP is then going to do something in a functional democracy, like in the UK's Westminster model, at least. The MP is then going to reach the whichever department or whichever foreign government you are involved with through the relevant department of the government. So there is a process to which you feel a part of that process. So that gives you the kind of satisfaction which gives you mental stability. Your mental health doesn't suffer. And so that is why democracy is important. It's not a perfect system, but it is the system which we've got right now, which include the people. And because of that inclusion, you've got a sense of ownership. And that sense of ownership is a sense of ownership that you are governing your own life. You've got a say and how your life goes about, right? So because of that, you've got this stability in life, which is very important to lead a peaceful and normal life. That is why that democracy is really important. But having said that, if you think that, as I've already told you, there's not a perfect system, there are fringe elements in the society We're not a majority. Like in Pakistan, the Baloch in the Balochistan, the Baloch people believe that the Punjabis, they rule, or the Sindhis, or the people in KPK, the thought process of the mainstream, they are the one who are benefiting from the democracy, which is true actually. And democracy, the benefits of democracy are not being extended to them, which is true actually. So that is the downside of democracy. But that can be resolved by devolution of power to local governance. If you've got local governance and if you've got devolution of power, like we've got that in the UK, so like you can choose your own mayor at least. You've got Sadiq Khan as mayor in London, and then the Mamdani debate in New York. Yeah. So the people in New York wants to have Mamdani as their mayor, and if they get Mamdani as their mayor, at least that's giving them a sense of ownership of their city, no matter what President Trump says. So that is how democracy is still a system which is functional, and it's still a system. I mean, we haven't got a better system than this at this particular time, a moment. But then we've got the fringe elements in the society who can be, whose grievances can be satisfied through the implementation of the devolution of power. That's what I believe in the system. And it's not perfect, but it works for us. So it should be allowed to prosper. Yeah.
And what about freedom?
Oh, well, you see, freedom is a state of mind, actually. You know the consequences of speaking up. There is no real freedom in the modern world we live in. Let's kill that point from the onset. There is no real freedom. But freedom is a state of mind. It's the choices you take. And there's a cost to be paid for those freedoms. If you're willing to pay the costs, then you're a free man. And the cost could be as high as the one paid by William Wallace or by Bhagat Singh, right? They gave the choice of their freedom. They paid the price of freedom through their lives. So it's a choice. Freedom is always a choice. But if you make the choice, then be ready to pay the price. That's what I say. I keep it simple.
Recent polling carried out by YouGov across Europe has shown that young people are concerningly beginning to lose their faith with democracy. About 50% of young people in France and Spain, only 50% believe it is would be supportive, and it's worse in Poland. It's good in Germany. But what do you have to say to those young people, especially, who may be losing sight of the values of democracy and freedom?
It's all about occupying space. If you're leaving the space which can be occupied to be influential in decision making, you're not going out to vote. A lot of young people in Europe do not go out to vote. And anywhere in the world, they think that their vote doesn't count, or their participation in democratic processes and policy making doesn't count. So you're leaving space for, let's say, lobby firms or lobbyists who are very small in number and who are getting these articles published, and they're then trying to make opinions through hired guns, and then they are going to enforce those opinions as policies onto you, and you get disillusioned. So at the end of the day, the joke is on you. You have left that space which has been occupied by the people you don't like, or the people you complain about. You have left the space for them. Don't leave that space for them. So take active, take controls of your own political discourse by being part of the process, part of the democratic process, and then you've got a right to complain. But if you're not part of a democratic process and then you're complaining, I don't think it's not fair to complain. If you choose not to be part of a process, and then of course you're complaining, then I don't think you've got a right to complain. And you need to study the third world model, like countries in Pakistan, like countries in North Korea, I would say, where freedom is not a given, where democracy is definitely not there. It's managed, micromanaged to an extent that even your own MPs, the people you vote for, they don't get elected. The results gets changed overnight. So you got that right. Your vote does count. Your vote counts. Your voice does count. So make it heard. Make it heard in a manner, in a democratic manner, and don't give that space which is occupied by, once left by you, by superficial forces, people with power, by lobbyists, and then they get the things done. They want to get it done through corrupt politicians or funding politicians or funding their campaigns or whatever other means are there, alleged means are there. So don't leave that space. And if you left that space, then you don't have the right to complain. That's what I have to say to them.
And do you have a message to send to the kleptocrats, the oligarchs, the autocrats of the world?
I will again come back to the Sufi perspective of life, based upon which I spend my own personal life, that no matter what amount of wealth you possess or you amass through corrupt practices, you won't be able to enjoy it, because firstly, the life is really short. First. Second, the sins of the fathers are paid by the children. So if you've earned the wealth through illegitimate means, and if you got blood money coming into your family, so that will definitely going to affect your coming generations. And there have been repeated evidence of this, that the blood money or money which comes to corruption results in destroying lives of generations of a family, of a particular corrupt individual's families. And they are never at peace with that kind of amount, because at the end of the day, it is about money. You're doing it for money and power, right? Of course, for money and power. But power corrupts, and ultimate powers corrupt you ultimately. And the corruption will, maybe even in your own lifetime, you will see the things happening to your own children, to your grandchildren, maybe the things you don't want to happen. And you'll see them suffering. There'll be no shortage of money or assets, but you'll see them suffering in ways which will then, definitely break your heart. So I know it's a compassionate sort of thought, but that is what I've seen happening in my countries. The generals who made billions through corruption, well, they have not been able to enjoy it. They've been suffering from different ailments, maybe, or their kids. They have really, plundered that money. Because of that money, the easy money, easy come, easy goes. Their lives have been spoiled. And the kids are fighting over that money. So what good does that money and what good does that power if it does not leave you a legacy to be proud of, and if it does not give you the peace which you seek? Because I see the people which have got the most money there, they seek the kind of players which are only available through contentment. Contentment is a kingdom. And contentment does not come through blood money or corruption, money through corruption. Then to get there, to find that contentment, which is ultimately a kingdom in itself, you seek drugs, you seek pleasure and a wealthy pleasure, and you become an alcoholic, or you go for womanizing, but there is no peace there. Peace is only in contentment, is only in peace of mind. And peace of mind comes through knowing that you stood at the right side of history, you've stood on the righteous path, you've done the right things for the people, for humanity and people around you. And at the end of the day, you can answer yourself that your decisions have benefited the humanity. And if your decisions have not benefited the humanity, and you've done what you've done to get what you have, you'll never be content. You'll never be peaceful. You'll die miserably. And at the end of the day, we all have to die. And that is a reality. And that's what I have to say to them.
Mr. Raja, thank you very much. Where can people find your work, and what can they do to support you in this upcoming case?
Yeah, well, you can find my work on my website. It's soldierspeaks.org, soldierspeaks.org is my website. You can support me there through the support me page. I've got a fundraiser on GoFundMe as well called Fight Against Fascism 2, and you can support me on there. You can support me there as well. My work could be found on my website soldierspeaks.org. It can be found on my X profile, Twitter profile, formerly Twitter profile at Soldier Speaks. That is at SOLDIERSPEAKS, lower words, no space. All right, Soldier Speaks. And then I've got my work published on different platforms as well. But my main platforms are Facebook page is there as well. Major Adil Raja is the Facebook page. And then I'm present on different social media platforms with the handle of @SoldierSpeaks. And you can find me over there. Thank you.
Mr. Raja, thank you very much. For my audience, the links to those shall be in the comments below. Thank you all.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. It was a pleasure talking to you. Thank you.
That's it for this episode of Why We Fight. What struck you most about their story? What did you agree or disagree with? Drop a comment and let us know. And if this conversation meant something to you, don't forget to like, subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who cares about democracy as much as you do. To get early access and support independent journalism, join us on Patreon or Substack. Links are in the description. And if you want to connect with a global community of people who care about freedom and human rights, come hang out with us on Discord. Until next time, remember, democracy is non-negotiable.